Okay. I'd like to call the meeting of September the 30th to order. The first item of business is public comment. There is someone here for public comments.
Good afternoon. I'm Kellum DeForest, and I have 3 items of public comment. The first one is, and I think it's been Mr. Jacobus can comment on it, but I got a flood of phone calls and that about what was going on at 301 East Canon Perdido. That's the corner of Canon Perdido and Garden Street, and it looked like they were tearing the building down, but Jake tells me that they are just trying to replace wood siding that had rotted. But I wish there had been some prior notification. The other item is I'm getting a lot of comment and bemoaning of the state of Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. I thought they were just going to make some minor, or not minor, but minor restoration and increase the size of the, increase the capacity. But they tore it down, all but the front facade. How did that happen? And third, you probably know, or some of you know, the Mission Canyon Bridge got hit again, and it knocked off the stones that or I don't know whether they put back. I think we need, or somebody needs, rather than just having Public Works put back stones, I think we really need to get a stonemason like Ozzy DeRoss in there and tell us what to do and how to restore it, because it never, until just recently, really was damaged in my lifetime. I don't know why why people keep hitting it and it falling down so easily. Thank you.
Thank you. Jake, did you want to comment about any of this? Okay.
Channel 18's listening, and we'll turn it on for us. Okay. Two of these, one of them want to pick me up. Yeah, I was going to comment on also that unfortunately, yeah, they heard me. This is the current state. Now, we just spent $35,000, no, I say we, I mean the city, just spent $35,000 repairing that railing. It had been hit twice. And it took us a while to get the funds for it. They were able to get the funds, hired a reputable firm that does stone restoration work, put it back together, and it's been hit again. As you can see, fairly severely. I don't know what the answer is. A lot of times when you see bridges like that in the country, they have like reflectors and things on it, but we really don't want reflectors on this gorgeous. It's the oldest surviving bridge in the county. It's got beautiful stonework. And it's also got this pedestrian path that was added that's being blocked by the stones. So I'm not sure what the answer is. The only solace that we have is that they hit that pretty hard, and whatever they did to that bridge, they did to their car also, because obviously they didn't stick around to let us know what happened. That's what happened. The others were hit and runs also, 2 times. So the city's aware of it. I don't know, with the fund situation, what it is right now, what will happen. Certainly we'll work to get the stones off the path so it can be clear again. And then we'll have to have somebody come out and do some repair. So that's one item. The other item is...
Can I comment?
Certainly.
On that item while we're on it?
Certainly.
And that is, if it's possible, when you pick up the stones, put them in a safe place, because people...
Yeah, we don't want kids rolling them down there. We did that the last time. They took them and they stored them where they weren't obvious for kids to get at them. And
they should be labeled and perhaps brought off-site until such time that it could be repaired, because people might want that stone for their gardens.
Yeah,
I
it's
might.
a pretty heavy stone, but I guess 4 people could probably walk off with one. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I will talk to them about the secure storage of the stones. The other was talking about 301 East Cannon Perdido, and I can understand how that may shock some people. This is currently occupied by the nonprofit Legal Aid Foundation, and they've got some severe dry rot and water infiltration problems. And so what they did, we gave them an administrative approval to replace 600 square feet of the siding. It's the 2 sides that get the sun believe it or not, where the problems were. The sides that were in the shade, the siding is okay. The siding is being milled to the exact specifications of the original siding, and it will be wood and painted. So once it's back on, you won't realize that the siding has been replaced. The roof, the shingle roof needs to be replaced, and possibly some plywood decking under that shingle, so that'll get done. And then there's four original wood windows up in the front that need to be replaced, but they will be replaced with wood windows with a like-for-like mullion pattern. So essentially, and then this door here is going to be fitted with handicap pull, what do you call it, device on it, so they'll have a handicapped entrance, which they don't currently have. And there's going to be a slight, where the sidewalk is, there's going to be a slight rise in the concrete in order to provide handicapped accessibility with the minimal amount of intrusion. So once all that's done and the building's put back together, it'll get a fresh coat of paint, which it badly needs. And of course, this work will help the building to survive for many, many more years. So that's what's going on with that. So we put it on that. Yeah.
Question about that. Is this any kind of structure of merit or any
Yeah,
designation?
it's a designated structure of merit.
So would we see the roof tiles
It's
before?
not going to be tiles. It's going to be shingles.
I'm on.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So what I'm going to say is, when they re-roof it, are we going to be able to see the color and texture of that roofing material?
They're going to re-roof it with a similar
Very similar.
material. Yeah,
I
that's the only
see.
reason why we handled it. We needed to get this job going before the rainy season got going, and it had some, like I said, it had some severe problems that could have become
Sure.
much worse quickly. If you have a desire to see that, or if staff is uncomfortable with the selection, we could certainly bring that forward to you.
It looks way different.
Yeah, if it's looking to like
By
a problem.
consent or something.
Yeah, we could do something like that for you. And then the Our Lady of Guadalupe. That one, we reviewed the structures report, and unfortunately we had sort of the perfect storm of errors that occurred through the processing of that application. The structures report determined that the building had significance because of its association with the Mexican-American community in Santa Barbara and as a familiar visual feature in the neighborhood. It determined that it was structure merit-worthy, but not for any architectural reasons. The building had been moved onto the site, had been altered quite significantly over the years. The proposal was, and the report was based on, was maintaining the front facade, because that's where the significant details were, maintaining the Italianated brackets and things off the sides of the building and windows, and reusing those in the new addition. It came in 2 phases. Initially, they were going to put one side chapel, so it was going to be sort of an L-shaped. And then, I don't know, I guess they came up with the funding and decided it would be the time while the building is being worked on to put the second side chapel. So it'll actually be like a regular church where it has sort of a cross crucifix shape to it. The problem we had with this, we reviewed the reports. The report came ahead of the case. We generally, this is why we don't like to see historic structure reports without cases, because sometimes the connections aren't made. The reason the connections weren't made is the building sits on 2 APNs. The APN line actually runs, the property line runs sort of through the building. And depending on which APN number and which of the 2 addresses that the building occupies, you look up, you get different information. Now, it should have been caught. I can only sit here and take the blame that staff made a mistake, and we should have caught it, and it should have been reviewed by you. However, given the fact that the building was not architecturally significant in itself, I mean, it's the association rather than the architecture itself, and they are preserving windows, brackets, and the front facade as the report that you approved requested. I don't think that we're actually in any deep water. I think what's going to be built will be, more or less acceptable by you all. You might have tweaked things a little one way, whereas the ABR would tweak things a little bit the other way, but I feel comfortable that the end result is going to be a good product. And there again, it's the association and the familiar visual feature of the neighborhood, which why it was structured merit-worthy. We did correct the tags. Both tags now say that it's on the potential list. There again, because of its association. Take any questions if you have any questions on this particular issue.
Apparently not. Thank
Okay.
you very much,
Sure.
Jay. Answered all questions, I think. Next. I said I think that answered all the questions you posed, and for our information.
Okay, are you saying that it isn't a significant structure? The church, or the former church, now it
Well,
is there?
The report had concluded that the building itself, because it had been moved onto the site, and because it had been so altered over the years, that the building itself architecturally is
Right.
not
Okay.
of significance.
You know, it's historic
Right.
significance.
Its association with the Mexican American community in Santa Barbara, and it's a visual feature of the neighborhood. The front facade's been preserved, so the visual feature will stay, as it faces the street, will stay the same. It will be bigger, but they need more room for their congregation.
So, it's just the fact that it was the original Our Lady of Sorrows and got moved there because of the Lady of Sorrows
Right?
being built. Yes, no, okay.
Yeah, that's all covered in the report.
It is quite significant, is what I'm quibbling with. Thank you.
Yeah, and the front
you.
facade will remain the same.
Thank you. I'm going to go on to approval of the minutes for September the 16th. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Is there any discussion or change, revisions? Good gracious. Perfect, Gabrielle. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes as they are? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Next item is consent calendar.
Yes, Madam Chair, item A, 1316 State Street was postponed 2 weeks. Item B, 702 Anacapa Street was postponed 2 weeks. Item C, 2 West Mission Street was final approval with a condition. Item D, 1127 State Street was final approval as submitted. Item E, 1220 Chapala Street was final approval as submitted. And item F, 911 Laguna Street was continued for 2 weeks. Those items were reviewed by Commissioner Sharp, except item F, which was reviewed by Commissioner Adams.
Thank you. May I have a motion to...
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. The next item are announcements.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Jury will be absent today. And then, as I had announced, I believe a month ago, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, the annual recruitment for the City Advisory Group members is in the process now. I received an email, or we received an email from City Hall, City Clerk's office, so it's officially out. The schedule is out. Resignations from current advisory group members must be received by the City Clerk's office no later than Wednesday, October 7th, in order for that position to be included in this current recruitment process. So the application deadline is Friday, October 23rd at 5 p.m. Interviews for HLC members, prospective HLC members by City Council, Tuesday, November 10th at 4 p.m. and several other dates in November, and the appointments to be made on Tuesday, December 15th. So people can either log into the city's website, or they can go down to City Hall at 721 Anacapa into the City Clerk's office and receive this information. And then, I just wanted to let you know that staff recently finished adding photographs to the online gallery.
Oh.
So I went through, and thanks to Steve House. He's
Yeah.
been a brick through all this.
Yeah.
I added a whole bunch. I mean, it's just, after I got into his, the CDs that I had of his, I just, went kind of crazy. I hope there's not too many, but there were just so many good examples. So
Yeah.
it's way, way better now.
Terrific.
And then I
Thank you.
believe Mr. Jacobus has an announcement.
Okay, something exciting to announce. We've got the Mills Act has been approved by City Council and made official yesterday. So we will be taking applications for members of the public. We'll have those available at the counter, and we put together sort of a little fact sheet that people can pick up also, that we can fax out, that in case people are wondering, well, do I qualify or do I not qualify? We do have one strong candidate already, and I'm sure we'll be having a few more. So, again, the Mills Act has been approved, and
Incredible.
we've got our first real incentive. So we're moving up in the world.
Thank
How
you.
would you put the Mills Act in a nutshell? How would you briefly describe the program?
Essentially, what the Mills Act is you need to have a house or a commercial structure that's that would qualify. That was actually designated as a Santa Barbara Structure of Merit or a Santa Barbara City Landmark. Eventually, we will also group into that potentially contributing structures to historic districts, but we don't have those yet. So right now, it's either a designated Structure of Merit, designated city landmark. The value of the house has to be below $1.5 million. The reason we're doing that is we're really trying to target, particularly initially, some of these properties where you've got a family that bought an old Victorian and can't really afford to to maintain it or to restore it. What this does is this gives you up to 60% reduction in your taxes, so that you can use that money towards maintaining and or restoring the building. The important thing to note is that there will be monitoring. I mean, not going to be in your living room every week, but once a year there will be monitoring. So you need to save your receipts to make sure that you have accountability for what you've done, and you can show that the money went into the house. But overall, I think that the program is going to be successful and give us a good tool.
Thank you. Mr. Schallenberger?
About how many properties are there, and are there notifications sent out to those owners that they're eligible?
We haven't individually sent out a notice to individual property owners. We had a show on Inside Santa Barbara that's run all this month. And I'm hoping to do another show on Inside Santa Barbara in the short future on creating historic districts. So we're getting it out that way. Obviously, people watching this meeting, word of mouth, and we've had quite a bit of coverage on it on the local newspapers. And so I think that it'll get out there. We hadn't really considered the idea of necessarily mail noticing to everyone that's got a structure of merit or a landmark.
Hi, I'm Limon, Senior Planner. I just wanted to let you know that Council also wanted to know if we were going to target properties, and I think Jake at the time answered that as we do our surveys, we will target properties that we think are candidates for these types of programs. So as we and also negotiate and discuss designations with applicants, this is something now you have as a tool to offer, and hopefully we'll be able to designate more properties as a result. So certainly we can look at our about 220 properties that are designated in the city and target the ones that we feel qualify. If you would like to have us do so, we could do that. We weren't planning to do it. There is a limit of 8 contracts per year. And so what we do is expect in the future, again, to have more interest as we go forward where we consider districts, and that's something we're going to talk shortly about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And of those 8 contracts a year, 2 of them can be commercial.
Uh-huh.
The majority would be residential.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements or any other items?
The Granada Tower antenna is in the process of coming down. I was up there a couple of weeks ago, and they were moving the equipment from the tower to the bay where it's hidden from sight. So they may be a week or so late from their target, but they are moving in that direction positively. So
Thank you. Yeah. The next item of business is subcommittee reports. And I think, Mr. Schallenberger, you had one about the El Encanto. You missed was 2 weeks ago or so?
a couple of weeks ago, I just wanted to pass along that I was impressed at the hearing a couple of weeks ago how positive everything was and what kind of support that the project had from the neighbors, which was in sharp contrast, I think, to a previous year, say. So we're going to be seeing that project again in different levels, both subcommittee and here, just for review. So I just wanted to impress upon the commission how positive that environment was there at that hearing.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just to add to that, they came to a compromise with the neighbors. You know, they've met several times with the various neighbors and came up with a proposal that everybody's happy with. Unfortunately, Trevor Martinson decided to appeal the project. So that was, it goes November 10th, I believe. So it may be if we could get one or more HLC members to possibly attend that appeal, to speak in favor of. Granted, you haven't seen the full project yet, but you know what the general gist of it is, and the fact that the neighbors are on board. We've got neighborhood support now. That's a good thing. So this appeal is kind of a bit of a shock.
I'd like to be
Oh, Mr. Adams, thank you.
volunteer and attend that meeting. Anybody else?
Mr. Schallenberger.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
And what's the date again, November 4th?
10th. Maybe closer to the day we're meeting more than that soon.
At City Council.
November 10th.
November 10th.
Thank you. Let's go on to the regular agenda, and the first item will be the potential list, and I think Mr. Limon has information for us.
Is this the discussion item, the
Yes.
HLC goals?
Yes.
Okay.
Potential list?
Okay. No. Okay. I thought you were
this
looking
says-
at me
It
as
says
Jake.
Limon.
They accidentally wrote your name down.
Oh, that's Jake.
I will be your Jaime Limon. for this
Okay,
item.
all right.
I'm in charge of first thing at the Korea's vacation day. Okay. This is an item. This is a really interesting house, by the way. Well, I want to sit up here because I want to be able to show some photographs
Oh,
of
I
the house.
pass by that every day. Yes.
This house I've been doing some research on. This is 603 East Valario Street. And when you look at the house, the quality of the construction, this is the garage. The canted doors are in the original location, but they're not the original doors, obviously. And the garage inside is canted like that also. See, when you came up the street, you just drove right in at a very comfortable angle. So somebody was thinking when they did that garage. And of course, all the beautiful stonework down by the street. The house is a very simple, if you can imagine, Irving Gill and George Washington Smith getting together on one house. There's one picture that I wanted to show that. Kind of set it all on that side. Yeah. Okay, we're going to work around it. Here you can see the detail on this house is highly simplistic. The only detail on the arches is this little notch. Here's the front door. The original entrance to the house is on the side. And again, it's just there's something about the proportions. That's why when I first saw this house, I know this. We don't know who yet. I'm still working on trying to get an answer. It's architect designed. I mean, it's got too many features and too many proportions that the average person just wouldn't likely have hit on, in one house. It's got its original windows. They're all wood windows, quite class. They all still operate. And then this is just looking back the other way through a window on the side out towards the porch. And the house was built. Originally, I thought it was built in 1914 because of the information in this title search. And as I did more digging, it took a while to come up with a permit, but it was actually November 29th, 1921. So it was a little bit newer than we thought. The house, unfortunately, as you can see on this picture here, there's some damage in the roof. The house had a fire in the basement, a pretty severe fire, and so it needs a lot of rehabilitation work. One of the very unusual features of this house is that it's made of 2x6 redwood framing, and then on the exterior is 4 inches of hollow core tiles, and then the stucco. So we don't know exactly why, and it goes on both floors like that. You can see the width of the walls. We don't know if that was done for some sort of sound insulation, maybe to make the house feel more beefy, as you will, more solid construction. But it gives the house a whole different feel when you're inside of it. And it's similar to 333 Junipero Plaza, where they had brick on the outside and then the stucco. So you never knew the brick was there. It was stuccoed over. So this is one of those little mysteries we may never know the answer to, but I'm still working on trying to get more information on the house and see if I can pin down an architect. But if I had to guess, Irving Gill and George Washington Smith got together in the night, and this is what they came up with. I did present this to the designation subcommittee, and they were fine with moving it forward. And I've got a letter from the property owner indicating that they would be willing to waive the 60-day waiting period. So I would like to request an action from the commission today to put this house onto the potential list.
Thank you. May I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion that would put 603 East Valerio on the potential historic structures and sites list.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the pictures.
And sometimes it makes it easier always, yeah.
Yes, I pass that thing every day.
Yes, I have a clue. She might give you answer.
Who? Come on, who?
Well,
Oh, don't spoil it.
Oh,
This is, you're going to get the mystery package when we go, yeah. Let's get together.
another house.
Okay,
okay.
great.
Okay.
Underhill? Francis Underhill?
No.
Okay.
All right, now the second item will be the discussion item of 5-year goals for the HLC.
Hi, Mayor Limon, City Planner. Wanted to provide the commission a little bit of background on how we came to have this type of goal plan discussed and updated. When I became a supervisor in design review about 15 years ago, now almost, one of the things our city planner at the time told me was that we should check in with the Historic Landmarks Commission on occasions to make sure we're on track on our survey program and our overall desire to protect our resources. And one, whether two tracks that were established at the time, one that we really needed to focus on prevention of demolition of structures. That was a really apparent need. We were having ministerial permits being issued over the counter and structures being lost without any type of oversight. So that ordinance in itself took about 4 to 5 years to get adopted, if you can imagine. It just got into a question of takings and reasonable use of property and so forth. And that actually helped us because it synthesized our survey track, which is the city attorney at the time said we need to actually coordinate this demolition review process with a survey saying that we have active surveys or planned surveys throughout the community that we are undertaking and that there is a need to look at these properties before we get to the survey area. So we created a survey tract and areas, and at the time we came to the commission and we prioritized what's the survey areas that we should survey, and we decided that the West Beach area, there was potential development concerns there that would be surveyed, the waterfront area. And a couple of years later, once that survey was completed, this commission also asked us to go look at the Lower Riviera. At the time, the Lower Riviera neighborhood or bungalow district area, there was a lot of concerns about development intrusion into that neighborhood. So we've been operating on that desire to do that work. But what's happened recently is we've had other workload items that have not had the program progress the way we wanted to. So this is a long-term commitment, this historic preservation work program. And we also have staffing constraints. And the reality is that as you look at this new goal plan for the next 5 years, we will have those same problems. The reality is our workload is going down, our revenues are going down, and we have a budget issue. And that's why our city planner is here. She's going to also give us some ability to communicate some concerns as you go forward and say, we would like to do this in the future. There's also this reality check of, can we do it? Do we have the staff to do it? And I just wanted to give you that background to give you an understanding of as we move forward and review what we would like to do, there is this balance that we have to meet with. Do we have the resources to go forward? So with that, we did create about 2 months ago a subcommittee, and I asked to meet with that subcommittee to try to get a sense of whether we could prioritize or give a sense of where you would like to go with future work, and whether there's a specific sets of goals that you would like to have us put at least on the table. Now, when we can accomplish them is obviously the challenge. And what we decided with the subcommittee meeting was that there were two immediate goals that obviously were of concern, and that has to do with the districting plan. and how quickly we can get to those historic districts that we've identified and we're about to identify as we complete our Lower Riviera survey. I think where there's potential districts, as well as our desire to update the Brinkerhoff Landmark District and call it a historic district, and the companion guidelines that I think are necessary that need to be officially adopted to try to protect that area further and to establish that buffer that you all asked that we try to get into place because of development pressures in and around that area. So I think there are there's support to go forward on the Brinkerhoff, and you'll hear from our planner on that. But whether or not we can get to the other districts remains a challenge. So we'd like to talk about that today, as well as what's come up with respect to when we looked at all our goals. The subcommittee realized that a lot of these goals really are fundamental to the historic preservation program, and should be contained within some preservation element. And yes, we are working towards that, and I think Ms. Weiss can give you some update on where we are with that and the timing related to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. Good afternoon, Historic Landmarks Commission. Your item for today, a goals program, I think is a very worthy and important process for this commission to be doing, and I wholeheartedly support it. I think when you look back, part of the memo that Jaime prepared a document for your discussion today, you can also see how much you accomplish. So having goals and steps towards those goals and efforts, even if they do take a long time or longer than we'd like them to, you get to a point where you can look back and see how much you've done. So your work is, in that regard, is really important. So 2 or 3 comments I wanted to make. First, with regard to the goal for a historic resources element, the Planning Commission has had discussions in Plan Santa Barbara and with the community. We have a policy directive document for Plan Santa Barbara that calls for the creation of a new element. There were discussions at the Planning Commission some time back where the question of whether or not it would be an independent historic resources element or combined with community design. At that time, it was thought that a combined element made sense, and there was some discussion, but the discussion has continued in the community and at the Planning Commission. We kind of read the tea leaves just last week, and it seems like, certainly from staff, there's no need that it be a combined element. I think we're moving towards an independent one, and at the time the commission, the council, or whoever gives us that direction, that's fine. We're already kind of headed in that direction. In terms of your goal to continue to support the development of that element and the actual realization of it at some time soon, I just want to encourage you that, or share with you a staff perspective. It may be different than your perspective, but I just wanted to give you mine, which is I would think the goal would be to carefully track and ensure that the Plan Santa Barbara treats the goals towards the historic element appropriately and that it is prioritized for implementation. That's how I see it, in that we still have a fair amount of work to do on the Plan Santa Barbara in terms of our land use and growth management and housing, which were set out as the primary objectives, and keep good track of the historic and get it as high priority as possible. That makes sense to me as a goal. In the immediate term, that's how I see it. But again, you may all see that differently. Secondly, the districting program, I know, or my understanding from working with Jaime, is that that really is a high priority. And I liked the idea that I heard from him that we may this year try to achieve some more on the districting plan. We inserted the historic district definition in this Mills Act ordinance, so we took one little step already when we had the opportunity. But the idea of perhaps working with Brinkerhoff and this year, try to make as much progress this year as you can. I really encourage you to do that, because I see things changing next year. So take best advantage of your, and try to accomplish that this year working with the staff. And why I see things change is in my last pitch. And you all were sent an email that we're having a joint planning commission City Council work session tomorrow in this room tomorrow morning. And it will be looking at our overall workload and programs and looking ahead to more difficult times. And I have included on the list of things that are pending and important some of the Historic Resources Work Program. And really encourage you to have a representative at that meeting so that when they're talking about priorities and needing to make some difficult choices on how we manage our work moving forward, that your voice is there. So I just happened to bring one extra copy of the report for anyone, but I think you were all sent a link to this as well. So I'd like to encourage that your attendance if possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask someone to volunteer? I cannot go tomorrow, but is there someone here who wants to?
8:30 in the morning?
Yes.
I'll volunteer to go.
Thank you. That would be great. It'd be a great representative. And Amy or Ms. Weiss, I'm not sure. I do have a question.
Yes.
One of the things that we discussed in subcommittee was the concept of perhaps a subcommittee on this commission working on sort of doing basic footwork on the conservation element and producing that for consideration by the staff and other regulatory bodies. Is that what you were referring to in terms of you'd prefer us to monitor the progress as opposed to?
Well, talking about the districting, I think on the districting element of the priorities, that is a very, that will be more staff intensive this year to help get that moved along to council and establish the Brinkerhoff district with its guidelines and all of that. So in that same time period of this coming year that we're in right now, the Plan Santa Barbara isn't, that group of staff isn't ready to do a historic element. So your all participation in that, I was suggesting, is tracking Plan Santa Barbara such that the housing policies, the land use policies, the mapping, strategies for where development occurs, that you be looking at that in mind for historic preservation, which again I think many of you have. I don't want you to lose sight of, which I understand is the main ball right now with Plan Santa Barbara. And then your question is kind of a third point, which is, while all that's going on, you're hearing from staff that we have a concern to also help really work on the historic element at this time. Could you all do something in that regard? I think that that's possible. I think that there is certainly work that can be done. I just think we need a recognition that for the city to adopt a general plan element, such as the historic resources element, that it's really important that we have our land use element and that in order first. It's just kind of a planner's point of view. And then secondly, at some point when your work really needs public review and needs, digestion and discussion, that's where staff resources are really necessary again. So I think a working subcommittee that you can make some progress, that certainly seems feasible to be kind of a third effort along with our districting, the Plan Santa Barbara, and then some level of effort that you all, that again is my point of view. You all may have a different point of view, and then the council in the end, when we're trying to keep reprioritizing things, I'm just, again, I want to support the goals because you need those, even if these things take a long time. So I want that message to be clear. I'm sorry to be delivering these times of
It's not like we're not
compromise or just resource constraints.
Yeah.
But don't confuse that to be deterring your efforts in any way, please. So a volunteer effort, keeping some progress, I would support that certainly.
Thank you. And my thought was really we probably wouldn't start that or do anything about that until the beginning of the year, so it's not an imminent kind of thing.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
it seems to me that Citizens Planning had worked on suggestions, and one of the people who worked on that was the person who had done the element for the city of Pasadena. And so it seems to me that they had made progress in suggestions, and I'm having trouble understanding why Plan Santa Barbara is an update of our general plan, and why this element would not be part of that at the same time.
Madam Chair, I'd like to address Commissioner Boucher's calling Plan Santa Barbara an update of our general plan. That's always been a little bit of a challenge. That's what they called the last general plan update in 1989, which all it really updated was it created a non-residential Measure E program. The city is not now, nor did we in other times, comprehensively update our general plan. Plan Santa Barbara was initiated very specifically to deal with the sunset. Well, I've mentioned this in many public settings. People's thoughts and expectations for what this program could do, should do, have really been a part of the challenge with this project. But I believe it's pretty clear that it was set out to deal with the sunsetting of Measure E and a new growth management program, that it was to deal with our state-mandated housing element update. And then the council said, we want to embrace sustainability and environmental movements. That's how the whole thing initiated. It's actually grown to be a full land use element update. Mm-hmm. See, initially it wasn't a land use element update, but the Planning Commission felt, from planners' perspective again, absolutely clear that this Plan Santa Barbara should result in a land use element update prior to a housing element. And so they laid that down as, staff, this is what the plan should be. Well, we also know that we can't do that without updating the map. So the map is part of the project. And we also, if you come to the meeting or monitor it, you can hear the update on all of it. We do have, however, again, we went farther. I think we have continued to go farther. So even though it is not a comprehensive general plan update, the City Council will be adopting policies, updating very many elements and have new policies that we don't have now for our historic element. So even though we don't yet have the element, the proposal is that the City Council will be adopting policies for city policy for inclusion in a future historic element. So I'm sorry if this is really complicated, but there were a lot of policy recommendations dealing with economy, environment, and we don't have those elements being updated now. But what we've done is we've just been opportunistic and included in Plan Santa Barbara policy language, even though we may not have the full update going right now. So I'm not sure if that's a new point of view for Commissioner Boucher, but it has evolved over time. But we never really thought it was a comprehensive general plan update. In fact, we've been pretty happy that it's grown as much as it can, but again, not everyone's so happy with that, and it's a challenge.
Right. Commissioner Murray?
Chair, thank you. Betty, I just wanted to ask, okay, now that you're moving forward and saying the change is now that there will be a possibility for a separate, and so assuming, let's work on that, let's say that is going to be a reality. Would it be possible to collect all those things that the citizens have submitted toward that particular, and would that be possible? I would be happy to work with you or to collect all those things and put them once again in the basket and say, what are these, and how do we craft that language of the preservation element? Because I think that is the most difficult task, is to craft that language where it will be completely supported with budgets, with the same commitment that is being done for other elements. They're all equally important, So, is that be a good thing to do, or will that be, not a good process for the staff?
No, I think that is a good process, and that's the one that we would follow. I just didn't see us doing that immediately. Again, you all, it's time for you to discuss your goals. Okay. Your group had identified that as an immediate thing, and again, I just wanted to share, we want to be as supportive as we can, but we do come back with this kind of comment. But again, you all, if you see it as an immediate thing and something that would not have to wait for the land use element, I respect that. I don't know if that's what you're going to say. I just wanted to give you particularly what we'll be talking to the council, and invite you and encourage you to have a voice there, because they're the ones that set a lot of the rules of the game here. So, but it could easily be done the way you're speaking. That is what I think we would do.
I'm envisioning it as sort of a workshop on the corner here, while the
Right.
big wheel is going on with other.
Right. And that I will probably come up short with the ability to support that in some relatively short time. But again, I don't think it has to stop. There can be progression towards goals. So I think that's what you should do. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, in fairness to the document, it really, I was passing around the oldest document that was setting out the HLC's goals.
Oh, yes.
It was called a 4-year plan at the time, and it was also broken up by first year, second year, third year, fourth year. So in no way did I sort of imply that immediate means immediate. It could be, a goal within 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And what I'm hearing the city planner saying, a more realistic time frame would be to dovetail into that process. So we could look at these items that have been delineated as immediate goals or long-term goals and sort them, hierarchy. You can all vote on them and see if there's something's missing. It's on the first page at the bottom. Yes. That's where I'd like to focus our attention on, and the designations program, the idea of, again, districts, and I think at the subcommittee we spoke about 1 per year for the next 5 years, and I spoke to our city planner, and she sort of looked at me and said, we could start, that we don't know if we're going to have that same staffing capacity in year 2 or 3 or 4. So
I see.
Breakerhoff seems to be the initial start that we're in agreement that could happen, and see how quickly that goes and how controversial these items are and how much work effort it is to actually get them adopted.
And about that, the question is, what level of staff commitment is needed when you need to, so we have some idea of what we're asking for when we talk about.
Well, specifically, I can answer a little bit about what the direction I've been given is that we in design review have some capacity to do special studies. And special studies typically involves either senior level staff like myself, Heather Baker, and in some cases Jake, devoting that time commitment to that. And as you know, Jake's time is compromised or impacted by the day-to-day assessments that he deals with his normal review process, development applications, and inquiries. So it's always a challenge to get designations pursued, as many as we'd like to go forward. We know that having dealt with the potential list update, there's a lot of coordination with property owners and ensuring that they have a voice at the table when these properties are being considered for designation. As we go forward with larger districts also, there's more involvement with more folks. So we're going to probably have some neighborhood outreach meetings. And again, there is a ordinance that defines those districts, and in some cases there are guidelines associated with those districts. As you know, the Lower Riviera Special Design District, we took possibly maybe over a year to do those guidelines, possibly a year and a half. So it is a work effort, but as the first ones will probably be the most impactful, because as we go forward, we'll have a framework to deal with the process.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Jacobus.
The guidelines that we did do for the Lower Riviera Special Design District are sort of modular, meaning that we tried to design it in a way that we could take bits and pieces, and different neighborhoods will have different architectural styles. We'll have a library of plugins, to try and make it so that it's a more streamlined process, because it does take a long time to put those guidelines together.
Yeah.
And another thing to keep in mind is, the different neighborhoods have different levels of support, and we've got one of the neighborhoods being looked at has, pretty much absentee landlords, and we've got other neighborhoods that very strong support. So we're going to have the whole gambit.
Thank you. I would like to hear some discussion from commissioners about the goals that the subcommittee put forward, and now with the additional information from the city planner. Comments?
I'll comment.
Good.
I'd like to. I'm more interested in the one listed last. They protect and preserve important history and cultural resources and so forth. And we had I have already talked to Jaime about this. I'm concerned about the cultural element as well. There are things that the city is important not just in its buildings, but what's inside the buildings, right? And that in itself has a place in the land use element. A little pet peeve of mine is the legal non-conforming element that you see in all the historic districts. This, we just saw a few minutes ago, a landmark level property, and you could see right away how it was legal non-conforming, the garages on the face and all that stuff. And another very important component on all that, for instance, are the corner markets. That's a very important, maybe not visual, but certainly a cultural element of neighborhoods. And for over maybe 15, 20 years, I think we talked with Don Olson in '94, was it? And that's 15 years ago. And it was imminent. Oh yeah, we're going to have the corner market ordinance right away. And these places are disappearing or suffering because they cannot put tables outside, and they are basically falling apart. They cannot expand. They're mixed use. They're in the wrong zoning and so forth. So I see that as some important thing that needs to be protected as well. So we not only protect the buildings, but protect the people who live in Santa Barbara. Another part complicates more the discussion, but it's perhaps politically minded, is the fact that this city, as any organized city, had its area where for people were supposed to live, where there are 3 or 4 areas for higher density and the areas for less density and so forth. And we need to deal with some of these things very carefully, because we're going to have more landmarks, and landmarks have bubbles, and then pretty soon, where exactly does the vitality of the city continues and is retained? And that is as important for historic preservation as the buildings themselves. I mean, that is my take. That when we lose the Italian Greek deli and Mel's and the little Audrey's and all those places, well, the buildings may be there, but it's something that the city misses. And I think if you poll the city, you will find people are very, very concerned about that kind of a loss. The loss of the middle class, gentrification. How can we protect the goose, but protect the egg, but not the goose, or whatever the analogy is? That we need to do both. I mean, protect the city, the historic buildings, but also protect the people who will make the next historic buildings. That is my take. And I think it's in the element listed last. I think it's the one that talks about cultural resources associated with these historic resources. Thank you.
May I ask, Ms. Weiss, if, in fact, I'm sorry, if that is something that can be dealt with in the land use element, and we can take it out of our basket and throw it into that one, or?
Well, I think we have addressed that to some degree, but again, if you can take the time to review the work that we're doing and provide inputs like that. We have a couple of policies talking about sustainable neighborhood planning, community diversity. I mean, again, there's a lot of goals and policy language, but the ideas about how historic preservation and community diversity could go together, if you look at it through those eyes and provide us more input, there's certainly room for that. And that's why I'm saying, I think even though we may be doing the land use and housing element, which isn't, your top priority, you still need to see that that work is making sense comprehensively, knowing that part of our general plan will be a historic element, but already part of our general plan, we have the conservation element, and we have this work we're doing now. And so achievement can be made towards these goals of protection and enhancement in the community, both physically and culturally and all of that.
And
I believe, again, trying to make it the best that it can be right now.
May I ask, in terms of efficiency of communication, what is the best way for the commission to make known to the general plan process? Say, for instance, we have comments on various elements, and they are agreed to by the other commission members by majority. If we were to produce a document which said, in the land use element, this is the commission's decision and wishes, can we produce such a document? And
Yes. We are drafting the land use element now. We're going to the Planning Commission we're in October now? No, anyway, early November to have some additional land use element discussion. So that's an opportunity, but also, again, at any time, this is our mantra too, at any time someone goes on the Plan Santa Barbara website, reads any of this policy direction, you can write us an email individually, or you could write us an email or a letter collectively at any time.
But I would assume that collectively it means more.
Yes, I would think that would be wonderful. The draft of the entire land use element is due to be released in February of next year. So you certainly at that time want to read the entire document, and that would be a very good time to provide comprehensive comments. But again, there's going to be a lot of information coming out at that time. So between now and then, looking at that policy direction document that the council did, I could come back on another 2 weeks from now and give you a general plan primer if you want to know where we are and the documents. John Ledbetter is doing that tomorrow morning with the Council and Planning Commission, but we could do it on one of your agendas to help move your
We also, I think we're televising that also.
Right, it'll be televised and Granicus replay, all that'll be available.
Does the commission wish to have this update, or do you feel you can access either the meeting or the website, or?
Why don't we look at
December, because this thing,
there you go. We want to use your brain.
and if you can summarize that in what was decided in 10 minutes, I think that would be
Well,
very helpful.
the meeting tomorrow, I would really encourage you to watch that so that when we come back and we try to have just 15 minutes on your agenda, you've already done a little bit of the homework too.
Yes.
And again, that could be in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. The time is important, but you're not going to miss out. It's not too late.
Shall we agendize that for 2 weeks from now, then? Thank you. I would appreciate. I know you have very little time, and this is,
that's fine.
you know. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to point out something too. Alex brought up a really, a strong point. These corner stores. When I go out and do neighborhood work, I've often found that where I think potential historic districts are, there's a corner store within the district. There's a few, of course, that lie outside. But there's also a thing. We're looking at new ways of doing things. One possibility is to have a thematic historic district where we could designate all of the corner stores as a theme throughout the city, and that way we can try and accomplish something like Alex wants to do, which is make sure we protect them and we don't lose the ones that may not be in a neighborhood that's going to be up soon for historic district status.
That's an interesting idea. I'm not 100% sure that, I may be speaking out of turn, that this commission is ready to come to a conclusion about the 5-year plan, unless you are able to extract more than I am.
We don't have to actually go through I think there were 5 long-term and the 2 immediate. I've just relabeled them 1 to 3 and 3 to 5 as a range, and maybe I can continue to work with the subcommittee and report back to you once we hear a little bit more of the outcome of the budget direction council on what realistically we can do or not do.
Right. I think that, yes.
I do have a little bit of feedback on this. It's just an addition.
Sure.
Look at the long-term goals and look at item 4, which I think is a wonderful statement. Develop ordinances and policies to further protect historic landscapes and trees. I like that. But could we also add landscape features? And that might mean, the important sandstone walls. It just gives a little bit more definition to that.
We can do that.
That was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a minor comment.
Okay.
So directed back to the subcommittee, we'll continue working on refining
it.
it.
I think this was a good discussion, and I think that, particularly having Ms. Weiss here was very important. And I have to say, all these years, whenever I go to these work session things, I sit there and I think, oh my God, they're loading more stuff on the staff, and I just can't believe you just sit there and say, yes, okay. So I certainly do appreciate, what's going on behind the scenes here. Thank you.
Thank you.
My apologies to the next item, which is the Historic Structures Report for 540 West Pueblo, but I think this was, an important item. Yes, Mr. Schallenberger. Okay. There you go. Well, will you introduce yourselves for the record and...
Yes, I'm Shelley Brookspan, and I'd like the project historian, and when I get around to it, I'd like briefly to introduce the revisions that I submitted. Okay.
Okay.
I'm Brian Cornell, just if you need anything.
I got
did bring a full set of pens, a cup of coffee.
But we didn't. So, okay. Ms. Brookspan, will you talk about this, and then after that we'll take public comment, of course.
Yes, of course.
Mr. DeForest.
You got a package. Basically, there are three things to address. Number one, in response to the HLC's request, we met on September 2nd. One of your requests was that I revise the report to address the effects of new construction of the proposed new cancer center facility and ancillary garage on the two Junipero Street structures of merit. And I have included then an analysis of the applicable Secretary of Interior standards, and that applicable standard is 9, on 519 West Junipero, and that's in page 15 of the revisions, and on 525 West Junipero, and that's pages 16 and 17. And in addition, so that you can be aware of some of my source material for my analysis, I've attached at the back the perspective views, the 3D perspective views that Mr. Cornell's office produced. Second, in response to the HLC's request for identification and illustrations of nearby comparative cottage structures, I revised the entire 526 West Pueblo Street report. Now there is a section in there illustrating some of the existing cottages just around the corner. So it's within a tenth of a mile, and it is a much purer kind of a street because it's all residential. There are more examples, but I think the four I gave should be sufficient. I've also expanded, while I was revising the report, I expanded the architectural description, and I think significantly, at least I think it's significant, I also gave you some more explicit information about the mitigation options that we very expressly considered here. We went through a lot of exercise going through in the MEA, the lists of possible mitigations. I had Mr. Cornell, at my request, made some initial drawings incorporating parts of the buildings on Pueblo Street into the new facility. I tried to explain why that really didn't ultimately seem like a good solution. We talked about relocating on the other side, on project site, the other side, which would require jeopardize the historic trees. So you have miscellaneous goals not being met. So I tried to explain why we chose the mitigation option that we did choose. So that's a sort of in addition. Third, in response to your third request, I expanded the section on the history of Cottage Hospital, which is, of course, one of the major influences in the neighborhood. And then finally, I just made a few additions, revisions of my own. I enhanced the project description and expanded the bibliography and such. So,
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
I'm going to open public comment, please. Will you introduce yourself?
Ellen DeForest.
Thank you.
I have, think we got this report. I just have a number of specific comments. Page 2. It would have been very helpful, and I think it still would be helpful, that in the parcel map, the actual parcels be designated with a cross-hatching or some way. I had to go through and pencil them in with a magnifying glass, and it was quite a so the parcel map should show the extent of the development. On page 3, I gather this is not the time to comment on the appropriateness of the national park style for Santa Barbara. On page 4, it says, at 521 West Junipero, at this address, replacing the existing modern three-unit apartment building. The definition of modern, I think what is needed there is the date of construction and the architectural style. Modern, is it a modern building? Is it a modern architectural style? Does modern refer to the date? That's unclear. I would think it's important in these kind of documents not to just brush off structures that aren't 50 years old. They at least, these documents are for posterity. We at least should say what they are. A field survey of all above these structures did not reveal any remaining structure younger than 50 years to hold potential. And reading this, we need to know what these structures are and when they were built. I'm questioning the phrase on page 5. There are two distinct aesthetic and architectural forces influencing the feel and look of the neighborhood, Oak Park and Cottage Hospital. What about the neighborhood of the 20s, or the teens and 20s when Oak Park was developed?
Mr. DeForest, will you start wrapping up? That's
Yeah, okay, I've got one.
Thank you.
What is omitted on page 6 is the importance for the entire area, and maybe it's in the previous report, that the streetcar line went to Oak Park, and this is what made the development of the area possible, because people had transportation. And on page 12, should there be a examination of the impact of the new Cottage Hospital, the one that's being built now, on the neighborhood? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to close public comment unless there's someone else, and I will take questions from commissioners.
I have a question. I didn't find it, but are there any garden walls, sandstone garden walls in the area? Do they have any significance? No, they're not. Not on Pueblo and not on Juniper. Thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's go to comments. Are there any comments?
Jake, did you look this over?
Yes. Essentially, what you have are the sections that are being replaced. If we approve the report today, then we'll be provided with the full report bound, and we'll have that for our final copy. So that's why you're just seeing these sections, and maybe Callum was missing some of the parts that were previous, so it probably didn't work to his better advantage. Also, I wanted to keep in mind that we're reviewing just the document today. We're reviewing it under CEQA standards. This will be an ABR project, so they're the ones that are going to be making the neighborhood compatibility findings for this proposal. But that'll be on them. So basically, we're just looking at this report, and I believe that Shelley addressed the issues that were requested. I question a little bit, going all the way up to Cottage Hospital because of the fact that this impact, there's some distance between the buildings, but I think Shelley discussed that anyway in the report as requested, and so I would recommend approval of the report.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
On page 6, and this is a question, not a comment, when you talk about Oak Park, you see, according to park historian Mary Louise Days, do you mean city historian, or is that really?
No, well, really what I meant is that she wrote a park history.
Okay, I didn't know that. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
I think there's some validity to the point of
Yes.
indicating where the development is. I'm not sure if it's part of the other project or not, but something of the boundary with the existing structures in there. Maybe it was provided before. I'm not aware. I don't remember.
No, I'd be happy to do that in the final.
Yeah, plus the location of the existing cottage, the footprint of the existing cottage. Either here or maybe a little bit bigger. So it shows the existing cottages, the existing.
Oh, those are in the plans, the site plan that's attached to the other report.
There is an existing site plan.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I also thought of something else. The streetcar history that Kellen was talking about was covered in an earlier report for, and I don't remember the exact street number, but the house on Junipero Plaza where the guy with the candy store. And part of the proposal is that they're to provide an informational historical plaque indicating that was the end of the streetcar line, and they had agreed to do that. Right. It's just there's no point in really putting it in until the project is done because it'll just probably get damaged. So. But that is part of the conditions of approval.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to accept the report with, well, I guess we don't need those changes if they're already in the report.
Thank you. Ms. Murray?
I just had one comment, and it's a concern. But first of all, I want to say that I think that Shelley really responded to all of the things we asked her to do, which was providing the context. And what I appreciated was the background of the impact, or not the impact, but the role of the Cottage Hospital, its development, and Oak Park. Because those two things really, I think, really helped me see the neighborhood. And I also walked over there again, went there again after reading the second report, looked at Pueblo Street, and I think what would be good to add into the report is pictures of the buildings across from those three cottages to show that the reason why Pueblo Street has so changed and really has lost a lot of that sort of Oak Park small homes neighborhood feel. My biggest concern is this, and I will show it to you, is I mean, obviously we're not here, this is for ABR review, so I cannot comment on it, but I cannot help but look at this and look at the huge size of this project, and looking at these three small buildings. And one of the things that I cannot, it's hard for me to support in the report is that, to me, there just is no buffer zone. There is no buffer between these buildings and this structure here. Well, yeah, it's a parking garage. It's really what it is. You know, that's going to be a parking garage here. And I'm just so reminded now that these buffer zones are just becoming so important. And also someone said that those three homes are really holding the line holding the line between the Oak residential and these institutional developments that are happening there. So I just would really be so concerned and hope that when this goes to ABR, that they will really look at that buffer zone and see how it could be improved.
Madam Chair,
The project is going to Planning Commission also, by the way.
this commission has the ability, if you all support Fermina's comments, to send those comments forward to the AVR for their consideration.
Thank you. I do have a minor question, which is, can you show me in this previous report where the sites are delineated and where the existing are shown?
Yeah.
Isn't there an existing plan here?
The site plan shows.
But in nowhere is the parcel map delineated.
I'll make sure
and
that she gets, because it's in this set. It's
No,
we'll
the parcel isn't.
do
It was the outlines of the existing structure.
We'll just have her include this sheet, which shows is the existing survey, and outline all the existing buildings, so that that's
No,
clear.
it is not.
Oh, I apologize. I thought you did have that. I will include that.
Okay. Thank you. So that'll be nice and clear.
So my comment to the motion.
Well, if you'd like to make a motion.
No, I mean, Boucher had the motion, and
Oh, I see.
I was asking if she would not mind adding that buffer zone, whatever. I mean, just,
Well, I think poor Gabriella needs to have a motion that has these actual comments added to it. So, Ms. Boucher, would you like to restate your motion adding that comment?
To accept the report with the comment to the planning commission or the
I think it's ADR.
that, well, it has to go to planning commission. Anyway, that a greater space be provided between the cottages on
West Junipero.
and the parking space.
A buffer? You want to call that a buffer?
Yes.
Not a buffers? Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Madam Chair, may I
No,
comment?
let's make sure about this motion. Is it clear?
So it's a greater buffer or a buffer?
A greater
And also, with regard to the request that pictures of the buildings located across from the three cottages be incorporated into the report, you mentioned that, but should I say that in the motion?
I think,
that was just
well, that is part of the motion, that in fact the report will be modified to include a site map which delineates the parcels which are affected and includes the existing residences, and it's graphically depicted that way. And then,
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, you said a site plan, but she said pictures.
You're talking about two different
two
things.
different things.
Oh, those are just, those don't need to go.
Just an existing site plan is what they want.
Yeah.
And then can you read the rest of the motion as?
What Ms. Moucher said?
Yes.
Okay. To submit the following comments to the ABR. The ABR, or should it be to the Planning Commission? That a greater buffer be provided between the cottages on West Junipero and the parking structure.
Is the commission satisfied with that motion? Would like to vote on it?
I'll second that motion.
Okay.
Just,
All those?
Madam Chair.
About the map.
Mr. Lockwood of Forest, son. You are not a member of the commission.
No, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'd like to give a historical angle to that motion, because it came.
Why don't I withdraw my motion and you just vote it?
No, not me. I mean, I'd like Fermina to formulate that comment from the historic perspective, right? Like, I think you're saying that something along the lines that you believe that a bigger buffer will protect the rest of the neighborhood, something like that. Because right now it seems like a number. It seems like, well, it seems like a design issue rather than a historic issue. So I want to make the process more straight to see like what exactly is it they were talking.
Is that okay?
Did you? The buildings, the colleges are new, they're redone. Is that correct? I mean, like
Madam Chair, I really need to speak to them.
No, let me see what the motion is first before you speak to this.
They're retaining 2 of the cottages and then building a new one. And so those 3 will be along the line. And then there's another one that is not historically significant, but they're retaining it, 601 West Trinidad. So my concern, in which I wanted to put it in motion, was those homes on West Junipero Plaza are the historical, since 2 of them are structural merit worthy. And so now you're looking at these structures. To me, those are the historical buffer line between the Oak Park residential neighborhood and the institutional encroachment. And given the size of this project, which is humongous, next door to these 4 cottages is just really not historically compatible. To me, with reading the report, they did not meet standard 9 spatial relationships, enough spatial relationship between those historic resources and the new project. And as I pointed out in the map, so the motion would be to accept the report with a strong recommendation to the Planning Commission and the ABR that this commission, the HLC, wants to provide a larger spatial historical buffer between the homes on West Junipero Plaza, street, and the new project.
I need to comment.
But that's the intent of my concern.
So, Gabrielle, if you can add that with the part about the site plan, I think we now have a motion that makes some sense there.
Madam Chair, would that just substitute the first?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and then, so it's going to be what Commissioner Murray just said, and then
Yes.
also to include the existing site map delineating
exactly.
the parcels.
Exactly, and the existing residences. And we have a motion on the table. There is some discussion. Mr. Cornell is not a member of the commission, but for some reason...
I am not a member of the commission, but I am the applicant, and I think it's extremely important this commission understand that we have been to the Planning Commission conceptually twice on this project. We have been to ABR multiple times. There are many site constraints on this property and project. And there is very little give and take. By the time I'm saving all the oak trees that I am, by the time I'm building a new cancer center and removing the existing one and having to do those in such a way that the cancer center can continue to operate during the construction of the new cancer center and many, many other constraints, we have done everything we can to minimize the size of that parking structure and to maximize that buffer and to landscape it properly. And Shelley showed the views, and it demonstrates that you cannot see that parking structure, and the intent is for it to be landscaped and to go away. The problem with your comment, the reason I have a concern, is that you have not had the benefit of understanding the design of this project and why it is doing what it's doing. We have a tremendous setback along Pueblo, which we think is giving hugely back to the neighborhood. The building, the third story portion of the building is set back nearly 70 feet. So obviously, if the direction is to create more buffer between the buildings on Junipero, it means that I'm going to have to lose oak trees and lose that buffer. So something will have to give. And I wish that the commission would afford us the opportunity to present the history of this project and where it started and where it's been, before just throwing a comment out there, which creates obviously difficulties as I proceed through the process.
Given this capsule explanation, is there any wish on the part of the commission to change this motion?
Madam Chair,
Yep.
the motion is not in stone. It's just the opinion of this commission.
I understand.
And if indeed the other 2 bodies have done all the legwork that you've said they've done, they will still then come to the conclusion that this is where this belongs. But this commission wants to make a statement on what they feel is important to them. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a project stopper or that the other 2 boards will necessarily necessarily
Pay any
if they have-
attention to us.
Yeah.
It's a recommendation.
But
I just want to make sure that the commission is making comments in the context of the overall project and understanding it in its
And you
totality.
have explained it, and I think we understand, and I have asked the commission if they wish to modify the motion, and that's where we are.
Yeah, so what is the verb used? It says recommend, mandates, requires, would like to see.
Strong recommendation, Ms. Fermin is.
Okay.
And I will now ask for all those in support of this motion.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is 536 State Street. And again, my apologies, we are half an hour late. Let's go down. Thank you. Send that down. Whoa. Okay.
Hey, Don.
Been a while. Okay. Will you give your name for the record and
Don Sherry. I'm the architect for the project. It's taken us a while to get to you because it was going to be a consent agenda item and staff wanted it to be seen at full board. So here we are. It's been brought to our attention that when we have gone for a couple of approvals to make some changes to Joe's, that the back cluster of rooftop equipment that is, do we have photos, Susan? That is visible from Coda Street, that we do something about that mess of equipment that you can see from Coda as you're walking mainly from Anacapa to State Street on the World Market side of the street. You can really see it. The photos will show it. It's a complicated little area of the existing building because this is Coda Street along here, State Street's here, and then this is the Palace Cafe, and there's an alley that runs down here. As you look from this direction, you can see up into this area of a bunch of existing rooftop equipment that most of which has been there for a long time, but I was asked to try to find documentation of what had permits and what didn't, what could be removed and what couldn't, rather than spend a lot of time in the building department looking for something that probably doesn't exist. I just decided to try to find a way to make it look less visually obtrusive. So the complicated part is that there's a kind of a nice wall, stone wall that's been there for quite some time along here that I'd like to keep, and then if you look at,
do you need these photographs?
Don, is this the stone wall?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's where it turns the corner right here.
Okay.
And then this is the Coda Street elevation that it turns into plaster. And it meets in plane, which is kind of odd. And there's a little portion of this. Can you guys see what I'm talking about here? There's a little portion that has an arched opening into the back door, and then there's a little tile roof that kind of just sticks out there.
Do you need these photographs?
What I've tried to do, this is showing all the equipment, various lovely pictures of that. This is the elevation that I'm talking about right now. This elevation on Coda, there's lots of views of that. And what I'm proposing is to finish up the cap of the stone wall in an appropriate manner, getting rid of the metal flashing that isn't right, and also shielding up above with a plaster wall that the top of which ties into some existing molding that we have going on elsewhere in the building. And I'm actually, I think, eliminating this little weird piece of tile because it isn't picked up anywhere else on the building, and to try to tie in my new design with that little tile wall. Let me see what I did. I can't remember. It's been so long. So let me just look at it.
You repeated the trim.
I repeated the trim on
The mold and trim on top.
on the existing building. What I was trying to do is make it look like it was always built that way. So basically what I did here is there's a molding detail that runs along the side of the building, and then instead of keeping that funky little tile roof over there, I finished it off nicer, dropped it down, and kept the arch because that's required. It's the back entrance to the restaurant. And then removed this metal flashing along the top of the wall, and then put a stone cap around it, and raised the wall slightly because when you turn the corner and it goes down the alley, there's a couple of different things going on. Here's that, as it turns down the alley, it has a metal flash here, and then it turns into a plaster wall. So what I did was I got rid of that, raised the stone wall to get rid of this, and then put that wall, the plaster wall that's going to hide the equipment more from this corner. I put that wall back and shielding all that equipment. So essentially I'm cleaning up the wall and putting a nice cap on it, getting rid of this odd little element and tying the cap in, and then shielding the equipment with a plaster.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Oh, well, let me just, are you...
I am, except the only other thing I wanted to point out is that there is a duct, an air conditioning duct that runs toward the rear up the side of the building, and I just want that to kind of disappear behind a plaster wall that looks like a very clean chimney cap. I don't want to put a little house on it or anything. I just want to.
Are you plastering basically the chimney? I mean, are you attaching that to the chimney?
Yeah, the wall would be a plastered wall.
But it will be attached to the equipment or to kind of.
No, it couldn't be. It couldn't be attached to the duct itself. It's just going to be surrounding the duct.
So,
Then I'm done with the
where is that chimney again in the photos?
Right here. It's down the alley. It's way back here.
Back there.
So I think it would just
Let's
look
look
like.
at it on this. That's good too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's just going to look like a
I'm going
chimney.
to interrupt and ask if there's any public comment, which I must, before we get questions from the board. Is there any public comment on that? Seeing none, I will now take questions from the board.
Okay. The stone cap, that's just on the edge. Does it cantilever a little bit out from that existing stone
Yeah, it will
wall?
be a separate stone piece that stands proud of the stone wall.
Right. 1 or 2 inches, something like that?
Yeah,
or-
an inch or so,
Uh-huh.
an inch and a half.
To
It'll just-
create like a small shadow line.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. How come you didn't continue the wall to the end? Is there a reason like that stone wall? Just to save money, or
Which
right
stone
there
wall?
on the upper part, right there?
Oh, this side.
Yeah, is that or you need to move
I didn't think
equipment?
there's nothing that needed to be hidden way down the alley, and it didn't bother me necessarily that there were 2 heights at the end of the alley of that stone wall. What bothered me was the different heights of the wall, the plaster meeting the stone, and all those things.
Is there any other questions?
Madam Chair, I do
Yes.
have one.
Mr. Sharp?
This came before me at consent
That's right.
a couple months ago, and I recommended it come before the full board. And Don, at that time, made the statement that a lot of the equipment had been abandoned but left on the roof, which happens more than not, unfortunately, in situations like this. I assume that you have gone through and inventoried all the stuff as to which is usable and not, and so forth.
Yes.
Okay.
And we did take some things out.
Good.
Trash cans full of things. Lumber and...
I'm sure. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have some concern about the wall. I wish we had Jake here. Having done the survey many years ago of this whole area, I think that wall has historic significance, and I'm a little bit concerned about adding to it and how that's going to work out. So put a question mark at the end of that. That's a question.
Thank you. Well, perhaps we'll wait for Mr. Jacobus to return and come back to that question.
And we're not adding a lot, Louise, and we don't even have to add the stone cap. I just thought it was an appropriate way to finish it, but we could just do a stone cap that doesn't extend out beyond the wall either.
Well, the sheet metal is there to waterproof, I assume, or something practical, and you can't just tear it off and not replace it with something that performs that same function, it seems to me.
Are there any other comments? Or are we still in questions? I'm not clear. If we are still in questions, are there any more questions? If there are no more questions, let's move to comments. Comments, Mr. Peugeot?
Well, I think it's a great proposal. I had the same concern about the wall. If the wall is not historic, maybe Mr. Jacobus can make a determination, a quick determination. All we would need is to match obviously to match this perfectly, which may not be easy. It seems like the cap should be just a touch large. It looks like it's like a 4-inch, 3-inch. What is that? You have a. Well, it doesn't say. It looks like a 3-inch cap. It may have to be a little bit bigger to be consistent with the size of everything else on the wall. And I would send it back to consent because it seems like that's well there. Thanks a lot.
I have a comment or something. On the back wall, attached to the wall itself, there are some things there. And are those still going to remain, or have those been removed?
I didn't hear that first part, Louise.
Why don't you put that on the camera?
The what? Is the what going to remain?
On the back wall of the building itself. There's a square box and a tube or something.
Louise?
You know, I think you're talking about that that downspout. We could probably reroute that. We could probably reroute that downspout.
It's a rather strange little thing. I hate to say it, but I like the little tile on the entrance, but I may be the only one. I've always kind of liked that.
Does anyone else have any comments?
I guess as far as the stone cap goes, if you're going to replace that flashing, Alex, Commissioner Peugeot had a point that it needs to be thicker, maybe bigger. Maybe it protrudes even less if possible, or minimize that. I guess it needs to overhang to protect it from water damage. But I would minimize that cantilever just because it has an uncantilever wall now. And I really like the fact that this. Well, it could be that this. I like the different height of this wall. It's just kind of funky. Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't. Does this currently have a cap?
No.
No, I'm getting to a comment. Maybe you kind of. Maybe in some way you could match that. It would still be a different height.
Okay.
But maybe those are thicker pieces that are more look like they're lined up. I don't know. How does everyone else feel about that? I feel like if this is all trim and neat looking, it might change the character of that, and I like the funkiness of it.
Are there any other comments?
Yeah.
I think we're waiting.
On the surface of this wall is raised. Yeah.
I'm raising that little wall when I took that little tile detail off. It has to be raised a little bit. But I didn't want it to get too high because the arch looks too low when you raise the wall too high.
So this goes all the way back to this. That wall comes all the way back, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that molding should continue. Across there. It seems like it should continue.
That wall that...
No, the other one.
This wall is dying into the higher wall, yes.
No, but I'm saying that you have a molding on this wall, which is that one.
Oh, you're thinking that should continue? We looked at that.
You didn't like it?
And I didn't know exactly how we should finish it. So we could. It was kind of one of those undecided details.
Well, I'm going to be looking for a motion if there are no other comments.
I make a motion of preliminary approval with the final details to be resolved at consent.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries.
Thank you.
And I thank you.
Madam Chair, was that 2 weeks? Continue
Is
to
it 2
consent?
weeks? Is it 2 weeks, Dawn?
Yeah, that's
2
fine.
weeks, please.
I don't think you can do a motion on this case without continuing it with a date.
Next item is 28 Anacapa Street. Mr.
Henry Lenny from Henry Lenny Design Studios and
Jim Hughes.
the property owner. Let me just give you an overview of what we're trying to do. Even though the last time, if you recall, when we were here, we were talking about paseos and all sorts of things. I left the hearing, I went to take more photographs, and half the funk zone is gone because it's been demolished. And one of the reasons, correctly so, that the demolition was issued is because there weren't any red flags. In other words, the city had to grant the demolition approval, but the tragedy is that, again, we lost just about one block of buildings there. What we're trying to do is to create a arts district and to designate this area as a historic industrial area, the character of which, and I don't know what that is, the character of which would go back to the 1920s and try to define the type of architecture that would have been built in that era. Now, rather than doing that ourselves, what Kim and some other property owners decided that we were going to hold some meetings with the tenants and also some property owners, giving them the idea that eventually the end goal for this master plan would be to create a reproduction of the 1920s industrial vernacular, if you will. In the meantime, what we're trying to do is to just simply have this chain link fence broken, not broken, removed. And let me just go right up to the drawing which we're proposing. And let's stop here for the moment. Currently we have an island. There is a light fixture which we intend to relocate. And there is an existing palm tree that Parks Department may or may not want to. It's a Mexican
What we're
fan
looking at?
palm. Yes, it's a Mexican fan palm. The idea is to remove this chain link fence, open that up towards the 24 and 32 Anacapa Street, to try to begin a paseo system there. And the last time we were here, I think there was some concern about the design of the columns, and rather than designing the columns now, the thought was that those structures should be pedestals for public art. We have since spoken with the County Arts Commission, and these pedestals will occur throughout the funk zone. And so what we have in mind is that when they're not being used as pedestals for art, you put a cap on top of them of some sort, and we haven't figured that out yet, and they'll become light fixtures. But this would be the beginning, and it would have their own character that would occur throughout. But in the meantime, what we're trying to do is to create a pathway from the parking lot, which is underutilized, to encourage people to go through the beginning of the Paseo system. And so, in terms of what it is that we're proposing here, is using concrete with a rock salt finish and integral color to match some sort of a sandstone. Decomposed granite. Decomposed granite is not practical. One thing that I saw that was very effectively used in back east was to actually pour the concrete before it dries, to put yellow sand and then get a roller and have it embedded in that. That really does work very well. It's very convincing. So for the moment, the scope of our work is right here. In the meantime, we need to gather the community, this neighborhood together, so we can come to a consensus as to what we're going to do. And from what I understand from Jaime, today you can only give this preliminary approval because we still need to tie some loose ends in terms of the junction between the waterfront parking lot and the property owner. So, in concept, this is what it is that we're proposing, and I think we'll be coming back to you once we get some consensus from the neighborhood, and we all concurrently come and make a presentation to you with some possible guidelines on how to recreate this industrial area.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none. Is there any staff comment? Staff comment?
Madam Chair, we just want to make a clarification that this access point would actually go into a parcel that's subject to ABR review. So although Henry can't come back and share that plan, some of this Paseo improvement might be subject to the ABR review.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the applicant?
Yeah.
What are you doing, Henry?
The pedestals, describe this, the pedestal, that's a future improvement, obviously. It's in contemplation right now. Those would be raised because there's a way you can hide pedestals as well.
It probably would be raised. And the height of it, Robert, I'm not sure what that's going to be. That's why it's imperative to meet with the County Arts Commission. Because it also depends whether they're going to be sculptures. How high are the sculptures? Are they supposed to be reachable?
Right, I know that's not the subject of discussion. Okay.
Are there any other questions from the Commission? Sorry.
So when you are coming up with this idea of the 20s, is there going to be some kind of a study on exactly what that was? Are you going to be commissioning a historic study, not necessarily a historic study, but some kind of study to determine what was there in the 20s, what the vision is, all that?
And that's what we envision. It's not only for Santa Barbara, but some similar Southern California cities and how they would have dealt with the vernacular of industrial, ocean-related fisheries, lumber companies and so on. So that's the idea. So the idea is not to reinvent a brand new style, but basically to try to bring back historically something that could have been here via photographs and surveys and so on. But also, if there are not enough of that, is to go to San Diego and San Clemente and some of these other areas that have similar vernaculars of the 1920s and try to recreate that. And that would be part of the guidelines that we propose to include here.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, one more question. What's Mexican grass?
I don't know, Robert. You know, the things with the
Texas needle grass.
Is that what it is?
Texas needle grass, yeah. It may be called other names. Maybe people call it Mexican needle grass. But
it's a proper Mexican. I call them Mexican grass. I don't know the technical. And I tried to look it up and I couldn't find it. But those are the ones that...
Yeah, Texas needle grass.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Thank you.
They have the feathery...
Yeah.
Blow with
That's
the
the
wind.
one. Yeah.
Are they drought resistant?
Very.
Good.
Got that one right.
If there are no more questions, do we have comments?
Madam Chair, I think conceptually this is it's flawless. I mean, what can be wrong with this? You know, so I will move for preliminary approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Thank you.
Very much.
Mr. Sharp.
Schellenberger.
Oh, Schellenberger. Oh, sorry. Mr. Sharp.
Good memory things are always sketchy.
Well, sure, yeah.
To the full board.
I think it could go to consent, I would imagine, right?
I don't know, that needs to be made part of the motion, so why don't you guys figure it out?
I think we need to see this.
Okay, all right. So we'll go to the full board.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Jacobus, on the previous item with Joe's Cafe, there was a question regarding whether the stone wall was historic.
I do know that the sign is historic. I don't know about the stone wall because I haven't researched it, so I'd have to look into it.
I think it has been sent to consent, so I think before Mr. Sharp gets to rule on that, he may want to know. Madame Boucher seems to think so.
And she's usually right on that sort of thing. What I'll do is I'll check through the old survey records and find out what's
Thanks.
included, and I'll report back to Don Sharp as consent.
Thank you.
Sure.
And we were right on time.
Stepping down.
Yes. You want to call him?
So am I.
Oh, did they think we were running late?
They must have.
They're out.
They were
They're out.
surprised, surprised.
I'm going to go grab them.
Can we take a
Quick before they
5-minute
run.
recess?
How about a 3-minute?
3 minutes, okay.
Let's take a 3-minute recess.